Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are getting really close to the end of Edmund Ironside. There's just a couple monologues left to go. And today we're going to get to hear from Canutus in Act 5, Scene 2. Now, he kicked off the scene getting a letter from Edricus saying that Edmund might be catching on to the fact that Edricus was doing sort of this double-crossing thing. And that made Canutus really nervous, but he was still like putting on the brave face for everybody until Edmund's army marches in and he's like, "You're on my land, get off of it." And Canutus is like, "This is my land." And they almost come to battle again right there on the battlefield, but Edricus steps in the middle of the two armies. And he's like, "Wait a second, I have an idea. Everybody listen to me." And in yesterday's monologue, he gave an earful to both Edmund and Canutus, saying, "Look, so many people have died because of your feud, this feud between the two of you. And if you keep going at this rate, everybody's going to die, and then whichever one of you ends up king isn't going to have anybody to rule. And you're also not going to have anybody to defend your territory the next time that somebody comes to attack." So he's like, what you either need to do is split up the existing territory and you'll be king of that part and you'll be king of that part, or the two of you need to fight in single combat to see which one of you is going to be victorious. And Edricus is hoping that Canutus will be victorious in that because he prefers Canutus to Edmund. He really just wants to see Edmund die at this point. So Edmund, after Edricus's monologue, Edmund is like, "Yeah, I'll do it. Let's do this whole single combat thing and just have the whole thing be done." And Canutus chimes in and says, "Edmund, report shall never wet her tongue upon Canutus to eternize thee. I scorn to stain my reputation with abject titles of pale cowardice to make thee famous in opinion's mouth. I here accept thy challenge and his speech, glad of so fit a time to be revenged for all those foul dishonors thou hast done, and glad for sparing of that guiltless blood which in our quarrels this day had been shed. Oh, had this day been but a year ago, many a tall man had been now alive. Many a salt tear had been now unshed by fathers for their sons' unhappy deaths, by mothers for their children's wretched ends, and widows for their husbands' timeless want. But I am glad this long-expected hour at last is come." So he's accepting the challenge and he agrees to the whole single combat thing, but he has to start out by insulting Edmund and saying, don't even talk to me, don't even talk about me. I don't want to be remembered alongside you, like in history, and I'm not going to make you famous by dying here today. And then he's also, he gets a little like dreamy or emo in the middle of this, where he's like, you know what, if we had gotten to this point a year ago, how many people would still be alive, and how many parents wouldn't be mourning their children, and how many widows wouldn't be mourning the loss of their husbands and stuff like that. And I can't quite tell, because he hasn't been super nice to his troops through most of the play. I can't tell if maybe this is just like a show to try to get more people on his side, since they're gonna, start fighting each other, and he wants more people cheering him on than cheering Edmund on. But I do think that it's interesting that it's Canutus that gets to have the moment of, oh, if only we'd been here a year ago, a lot more people would still be alive and a lot fewer people would be crying than are crying now. But in the last two lines, he's like, all right, let's do this. I'm ready for this. I want to do this. At which point his wife, Aegina, comes in and she's like, "No, you're not going to fight him." And he's like, "Yeah, I am, unless you want to take my sword and fight for me." And they sort of go over here, and the focus shifts to Edmund and Emma. And she says to him, she's like, "Look, I get this. I get where you're coming from, but you are the king. On you rests the fate of the entire nation. Like, that's a huge burden to bear. Are you sure that you want to put yourself into this situation involving mortal danger, considering how much of a leader you are and how much weight is on your shoulders on behalf of the country and all the people that look up to you and are depending on you for their lives and their livelihoods and to lead them and all this sort of thing?" Whereas that guy over there, Canutus, is not a king and has no responsibilities, so he has nothing to lose. And she even points out the fact that when it comes to like hand-to-hand combat or one-on-one combat, it's not necessarily the strongest person who wins. It might be the person who has the least to lose who wins, because the one who has the most to lose might fight a little safer, if that makes any sense. So since if Canutus dies, no big deal, but if he wins, very big deal. So Canutus might be fighting with more heart than Edmund, who might be playing it a little bit safe, which means he might let his guard down at some point or make a wrong move or make a false move, because he's got all of this pressure of looking out for the entire country on him. So she's very concerned about this choice that he is making to enter into this one-on-one combat. And he is going to speak to her fears in a monologue tomorrow. So I will see you then. Mwah.